This is Jim Fetzer, your host on The Real Deal, continuing with the theme of the series of programs of non-combat deaths. I'm very pleased to have as my special guest for the second hour Dr. John Johnson, who has a story of the tragic death of his daughter, LaVena. Dr. Johnson, I want to thank you for coming on the show.
Okay, thank you for having me.
I've been very impressed by your success in getting your story out in multiple different venues, including the Los Angeles Times, and it's reading about your daughter's death. I'm just stunned that the Army didn't try to clean up what was going on here. The deeper I'm getting into these things, the more I'm concerned that the Army is more devoted to covering its own criminality and incompetence than it is to getting to the truth and bringing justice to find young men and women like your daughter.
Yeah, and it's too bad because they're depending on us to keep their jobs, and you're turning off a public that originally supported their loved ones to come in and serve their country. My daughter was third-generation Army. I worked for the Department of the Army for 25 years as a civilian, in addition to being a veteran myself. And so she was third generation, and talked about going to college all her life because she was an honor roll student 99 and 9/10% of the time when she was in school. And so it was a real shock to us when she got into her senior year and kind of came to me and told me she had considered going into the Army. And the irony is, I think 9/11 had a tremendous impact on her decision. She was 14 when it happened, and she came to me with a number of questions. Just couldn't understand why people would just kill innocent people. And that's the irony of this whole thing.
Well, as the founder of Scholars for 9/11 Truth, I wouldn't. I hate to disillusion my fellow citizens, but we have ample evidence that the government has lied to us about every single aspect of 9/11, and that it appears even to have been an inside job where Dick Cheney played a crucial role, and others who were part of this neoconservative group known as for their Project for a New American Century that wanted to capitalize on the historical circumstance of the demise of the Soviet Union, create a worldwide American empire, but felt that the American people wouldn't support it unless there were some traumatic event such as a new Pearl Harbor. And from what we have been able to discern, and there's a great deal about this on the website I manage for the Scholars group, 911scholars.org, yeah. They used this event, these attacks on the Twin Towers and the Pentagon and so forth, to, as a false flag justification. And young people like your daughter who were, affected and believed what the government told them could very well have been, motivated to join up and to do what they could to serve their country, and not knowing that they were being manipulated by their own government.
Yeah, and of course, hindsight is 20/20.
Yep.
I've learned a lot since then, even with just the scenario of the military as a whole. They've got a lot of problems, and the Army seems to be the worst culprit.
Yes.
My wife and I went to Washington, D.C. up in April of last year, and when we got there, there was this tremendous battle going on about abuse of women in the military. Now, of course, they were talking about rapes, and my wife and I, we got up there, and when we started hearing that they've been discussing this across the table and not gotten it out to the public, we were appalled. Because we felt that is the kind of information that we should have had privilege to, so that we could have presented it to our daughter for her to make her decision based on more than just patriotism. But
yes,
that's after the fact.
Well, I've read some recent statistics about the incidence of sexual assaults in the military in Iraq, and the number is staggering. I think it must be like a third or more of the young women who are serving in Iraq have been subjected to sexual assault.
Yeah, 1 out of every 3 females, according to recent statistics, and in addition to that, 1 out of every 5 males. So the males are not even immune to the sadistic nature of what happens over there.
I must say, I think that going to an all-volunteer force was a huge mistake for the country. That we would have been much more reluctant to get involved in a foreign entanglement like Iraq, which was not adequately justified. If the young men and women across the country, from all families, rich, poor, black, white, had been involved here, So I actually believe in the restoration of the draft, that we get, everyone from every socioeconomic status become involved, so that all families have a stake where they know their own sons and daughters could be placed in harm's way and lose their life or their limbs if we get involved in this. And then I think that only under the most dire circumstances would the American people be willing to support a military intervention.
Yeah, that is true. And not only that, when I was in the Army during the Vietnam era,
yes,
we at that point in time thought that was a gross mistake for us to have even been there.
Yes,
I didn't go to Vietnam. I was stationed in Europe for 2 years, but I got a cousin that went there, and he got killed.
I'm sorry.
But we just thought that was horrible. And then we turn around and don't even learn from our own history. And that's what's really horrible, because they teach us in school that history repeats itself. So here we are right back in the same kind of crazy scenario.
Yes, and the only explanation I ever heard for our involvement in what was French Indochina, picking up on this French colonial war where the French had lost and then we filled in the vacuum, was a program that Walter Cronkite narrated about 1968. I served in the Marine Corps from 62 to 66, including 13 months in the Far East, but like yourself, wasn't actually in country. Came where our unit was flapped off the coast of Vietnam to cover the evacuation of American civilians should it become necessary, which it did not. I would eventually return to the United States and serve 2 years at the recruit depot in San Diego. But the Cronkite explanation, which was a half-an-hour program that was never repeated, involved showing a map of the continental shelf off of Vietnam and how it had already been subdivided by the great international oil companies because it was reputed to be rich with oil deposits.
Yep.
And that show was that on one time, years and years later, Dr. Johnson, I would read a little article in the paper that had no particular significance whatsoever, saying how another tract had been leased by the Vietnamese. This is long after the war.
Yeah.
Leased off to one of these big international oil giants. But it was all really to just save their profits so they could make more money, rather than having to negotiate with the Vietnamese.
Yeah. Yeah, and here we are right back again.
That's right, where oil appears to have been a powerful motive for going into Iraq.
Yeah.
I mean, oil, Israel, and ideology appear to have been the three motivating forces, and Israelis, I think, were threatened by a modern, sophisticated state like Iraq, which had universal health care, it had a wonderful system of public education, it had a rich cultural heritage that dates back thousands and thousands of years. I mean, Americans don't realize, Dr. Johnson, that the Tigris-Euphrates Valley in Iraq is the home of the mythical Garden of Eden, from which Adam and Eve are alleged to have, lived their lives, and it's now covered with depleted uranium.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's shocking.
Yeah. I wouldn't doubt it one bit.
And this depleted uranium has a half-life of 4.5 billion years, which just happens to coincide with the scientific estimates of the age of the Earth.
Right.
So we're rendering uninhabitable, the cradle of civilization, and this stuff gets blown around all over the place. I mean, it's very, very dangerous stuff.
Yeah.
Now, you served in the Army yourself then, in the Vietnam era in Germany?
Well, yes, I did.
And what was your MOS at the time?
Actually, I had one MOS, which was that of a vehicle driver, but I was an athlete, and so I kind of ran track and played football. So I was sort of like special services all at the same time. In fact, I ended up getting scholarships to go to college because of my effort in the athletics in the military.
How about that?